Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Educatedcollins Snap channel. How you doing? So here we have a pretty important video for you guys today. I want to talk about the series drop changes and how they feel like a breach of trust for players. So let's get into it. Second Dinner did recently release their series drop down changes, which are Snowguard and Stegron going from Series 5 to Series 4, and then Shana dropping from Series 4 to Series 3. Now, this was posted on their Discord. I don't think it's on Twitter or anything like that. But these changes weren't super popular. You can see the upvote to downvote ratio is pretty drastic here. And the reason for it is not necessarily this change or these drop downs in particular, but what they've been doing recently over the past few months. They've been holding some cards and also dropping down some others. But I just wanted to kind of showcase what the series drops would look like if they stuck to their original schedule. So the schedule was a card would stay in Series 5 for around 3 months and drop to Series 4. Then it would also stay in Series 4 for around 3 months and then drop to Series 3. So there was around a 5 to 6 month period in between where a card would go from Series 5 to Series 3. That was their schedule. Now, that particularly changed here last month when Null and Darkhawk were arbitrarily or in some way stuck in Series 4. So they were supposed to drop down to Series 3, but they had this discussion or post about a flexible drop schedule and how they wanted to modify the release series of cards. So now with this extra month, we also know that Zabu is not dropping. And then in terms of from Series 5 to Series 4, Jeff and Hitmonkey were not dropped. And then Kitty Pride is a card I would say like people haven't really paid attention to, but it was released with the Master Mode series, and those cards have already dropped down to Series 4 already. But Kitty Pride is also stuck in Series 5. Now it got released. Look, it got bug fixed and released to the public recently, but it still was supposed to be in the game, in the cycle, months before. So I'm still putting it here. If they stuck to their original schedule of how cards were supposed to be released, Kitty Pride should also be in Series 4. Now, upside for now is that Ghost should be um, in Series 4, but it's in Series 3, baby. Let's go. So, you can kind of see some of the downsides, some of the upsides here. I don't think the Ghost change is warranted. And then you could also talk about Stature and Modork, but those cards are not necessarily supposed to be dropping down this month. They're because of them moving a lot of the other Series 4 or Series 4 cards earlier. It feels like, oh, Stature and Modork should be also dropping, but those, if they followed the original schedule, those should be dropping next month, so they don't really count. But these ones do generally count in what would have been in the game if they stuck to the original schedule. So looking at this, you can kind of see that there's not really a lot of benefit to the player. Yeah, you get Ghost early, but the downsides are drastic, right? 6 cards plus are being held captive, according to players. But obviously, secondary can do what they want. But the general trend is that the good cards are suffering, and the bad cards are they don't matter, right? They're willing to drop them because a lot of people don't really want to play with those cards. A lot of people think the cards aren't giving them high win rates and aren't worthy to be utilized in their deck. So the cards that really get affected are the cards that people do want to play with, do really have a connection with. And here we have their post about the flexible drop schedule. The reality is not all cards are created equally appealing, so we want to exercise more flexibility in what cards drop, series, and when, right? But based on the history so far, it's just like we're going to keep cards that you want to play, and the cards that you don't want to play, we don't really care about. They can be dropped. It doesn't really matter because you guys don't want to play with them. So other times it means we may drop a card from Series 5 to Series 3. They haven't really done that yet, and I really don't think they would really pick a card that people care about, right? It's usually going to be a card that just hasn't performed for the few people that have purchased it, and they're just like, yeah, not a lot of people are buying this card. Let's just move it to Series 3. We may even skip a monthly drop series entirely where the meta looks fun and healthy. That's the comment that really got me scared, really what got me thinking about, even before this month's drops, really got me thinking about, this could be a precedent for like not helpful things for players, right? Which is what I'm really looking towards here. So yeah, it's going to be a blanket decision based on data and player feedback. Player feedback mostly means like, are you guys buying this card? Then maybe we want to make it expensive still. All right, so next thing I want to talk about is just the first series drop, and this one I was skeptical in this first series drop when they announced this idea of dropping cards down, but this first series drop I was actually impressed with. She-Hulk dropping from Series 4 to Series 3 really caught me off guard. I really didn't think they would put that there, since it was, in my opinion, the best card in that Series 4 section, and they decided to drop it immediately. So that surprised me. Another thing I was pretty surprised was the Shuri drop. I thought this card was also really powerful, so was surprised to see those two cards in particular. Those were probably the best, in my opinion, some of the best cards in their respective tier. So I was pretty excited that, they're willing to drop down the good cards and they're not holding on those expensive cards or those very well performing cards. So I was like pretty happy to see this particular drop down. And then they went to the regular cadence, which I'm generally okay with because it means you can plan around things dropping, things moving in a particular direction. So the standard they set was pretty high for themselves in that it seemed that they were not they were okay with giving people the cards they wanted to play with, right? She-Hulk moving down and etc. It felt like, okay, this is something that we can work with if they're not going to be stingy about which cards are being dropped and not. But obviously that has changed a little bit, right? Maybe their feedback is now it's better for them to keep the more playable cards, the cards that people want in higher in the series. So next thing I want to talk about is just like they are now adding these bundles that can be purchased for a card that they've restricted. This one doesn't really bother me too much, but I just want to mention like it doesn't look good, right? And I have to say like, if you're gonna restrict a card and then make it expensive, it's just like it just feels greedy. But it is a company and they do have to make money, so like I'm not really too messed or pressed about this, but it is something that people will talk about, like, they were keeping this high in the series and now they'll sell a bundle, right? So I'm just like, hey, yeah, they are doing that, but it's generally something that makes sense from a economy standpoint. And another thing interesting is they are starting to sell Series 4 cards in the bundle. I don't think they have ever sold a Series 4 card. A lot of times there'll be Series 3 cards that people might want that they'll sell, but they haven't sold like a Thanos or a Kang or anything in a bundle. And this, I believe, is the first Series 4 card or so that they've also sold. So it's interesting, but I think this was likely inevitable. It's just something that makes sense, I guess, that people don't have easy access to this particular card. Maybe let's sell in a bundle, right? So this is not necessarily an issue, but it's something interesting, but expected for them in the game. And the next thing I want to talk about is the free monthly drops, right? With this kind of cadence now, they do lose their value. So before you could kind of expect, okay, these cards are dropping, I could use my monthly for this one. and then I'll just get the other two in a reserve or something like that, right? But now with this cadence, if you already have Shana, there's no monthly use for your drops, right? That free monthly that everyone got, that used to be like, oh wow, everyone's gonna get this extra card every month that's dropping for free. But now, since the cards move more sporadically, it's gonna be hard to plan around the drops or even utilize them, right? So if you have Shana, they're like your drops don't matter, and that can continue to happen. And they did mention that there's going to be some months that no cards drop at all. So if that happens, once again, your monthly drops just don't have any value. So it's kind of weird implementing this monthly drop system, and then the game is designed in a way to make you not utilize it at all, right? So it's like, here's a ticket for five free apples, but the apples can only be redeemed in the month of the 21st of July, and that's it. And it's like, oh well. What do I do here? So definitely a very weird system where you're making these value changes not have any value for a lot of players. Now, I think the main issue, I guess, for second dinner is that I feel like players probably might have too much resources with the token acquisition change, and like I don't personally believe that, but I feel like that might be like the issue second dinner might be coming up across, because you're not necessarily forced to spend your tokens on anything you don't want, right? And so a lot of players just have like large amounts of tokens. I look at some of like the streamers and stuff like that. They just have like 10K, 20K tokens just sitting there because they don't want anything. And it goes to show you that players can use their tokens. The High Evolution release was pretty incredible in that it's a big bad and it got released, but like almost immediately it felt like everyone had the card almost immediately. And that's pretty striking because the big bats are supposed to be expensive, right? They're supposed to be rare, right? They're the permanent series 5. But the way the acquisition change actually works, it's not actually that rare. And I would say the big bats are actually the most common cards to get because everyone knows that they're going to stay expensive. So you can save up your resources to focus on getting those. While some of the other ones, you're kind of aware that they're going to drop down. So it makes sense from a value standpoint to wait until they're cheaper, wait until they're 3K, or wait until they're free to get them. So the way that the system works with this slow drip feed of cards and not all of them being good, you really just save your resources until you have something you want. And everyone's doing that. So once good cards come out, everyone has it. So there's not really this feel of like scarcity for good cards because you just save until you can afford it, right? And the other cards that people aren't playing with, right? They're not worth to spend. So you just have this like bank of resources and then you use it. So it's something that I don't necessarily know what secondary needs to do about that, or if there's any change, right? Maybe they just want to focus more on the cosmetic stuff and have like animated, I don't know, moving variants or moving blah blah blah, or I don't know. But generally, like it was very cool to have a card come out and then everyone have it, right? That was definitely something I don't think you could have really seen immediately, and you can't really revert the adjustment, right? Any removal of economy for players is just going to have such a massive backlash. So their current strategy is just keep things expensive, and overall, I don't really know the solution here. And that secondary seems to want players to spend to get good cards, and they're willing to keep cards higher in a series to do it, right? And also, cards don't have a set drop schedule. Now, I think it would be helpful to let people know months ahead of time if cards are staying, but it definitely seems that the cards are staying as a reaction to people playing it. So, like Jeff, right, is staying up in Series 5, and I feel like, oh, if Jeff wasn't popular, then it wouldn't stay. But since it is popular, people it's staying. So it's hard to announce ahead of time whether a card will stay or not because they're just looking at the data and reacting from there. So it's kind of hard to have a solution where you're like, oh yeah, well these cards are staying, but they told us like 3 months ahead, right? So uh, it's a little bit hard. I don't actually know what they necessarily should do, but hopefully things change. Right, good cards. Right now, it's the case that good cards that people want to play will continue to have this increased price tag, and is this drop schedule. So it's a little bit rough because it's gonna feel bad for players, right? Like once again, it's more of a breach of trust because we were expecting this 3 month cadence and now it's not. And obviously, Second Dinner didn't necessarily say, "Oh, we're going to have this 3 month drop schedule." It's just something they have been doing for a half a year essentially, and they now changed it. So it the players have gotten used to this schedule over time, but now with this change, it feels like, oh, you lied to us. But they didn't say that they were doing this, so I don't like. There's no breach, but it's gonna feel like that for players, and that's really what matters, right? Like if the players feel taken advantage of, then it doesn't really matter what you think as as the company. Like the players really dictate things. Worst cards don't get buffed right now. They get ignored, and I really don't like that feeling, right? So things like Snow Guard, things like Ghost, right? They're not getting buffed. They're not. They're just getting ignored. They're just falling in the cycle, and that feels a little bit bad because you do want the cards to be playable, and it does feel like they're not really focusing too much on buffing those underplayed cards. They're more focusing on making sure that the good cards are staying expensive, and then just pushing along those other cards that people aren't really playing with. So yeah, just a little bit unfortunate, and I just wanted to talk about it since I do think it's a pretty big topic, the series drop changes, and I just wanted to make like a video kind of informing some of the thoughts there. So hope you guys like this. What are your thoughts? Don't be too angry in the comments. It's never too helpful. I do like productive discussion, but that's all I got for you today. Hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next one.
Educated Collins snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you tomorrow snap.